Now, I'm not one to assume, but I'm guessing everyone that I'm speaking to now has a gender identity. Whether you're a man, a woman, or anything in between, you have a gender identity that helps define who you are as a person. Today, I want to talk about the intricacies of gender identity, the differences between biological sex and social gender, and the apparent rise of new gender identities. The differences between men and women are less distinctive than one may realize and are worth further examination. Most of you have probably never thought about your gender. Most people can easily identify with the gender that aligns with their biological sex, so they don't need to think much further about it. Despite most people being able to identify with their biological sex, there are innate differences between that and social gender identity. Whether you believe it or not, gender and sex are different. They are two different terms that align most of the time, but otherwise mean different things. Biological sex is determined by genitalia, natural hormones created by your body, and sometimes even chromosomal makeup. All these factors can't determine actual gender identity, though. It would be impossible. Determining gender by genitalia and hormones excludes intersex people, people who have a mix of male and female features and traits. Intersex people make up about 1.7% of the population, which may not seem like much, but that is a comparable percentage to people who are born with red hair, which is only 2% of the population, and people born with blue eyes, also only 2% of the population. Chromosomes can't determine gender identity either because they can barely determine sex. Most females have two Y chromosomes, and most males have XY chromosomes. But there's no way to tell what sex chromosomes you actually have in you. Many women have been found to have XY chromosomes, not to mention the other not as common sex chromosome variations that have multiple X chromosomes or no Y chromosomes altogether. So if gender isn't determined by any of the factors that make up our sex, maybe we should take a look at what does determine gender. If I told you to picture what a man looks like, a couple of different images may come to mind. Maybe you're picturing your dad, one of your friends, or a celebrity you admire. When you're asked what makes this person a man, you're going to think of their personality traits, how they compose themselves, how they look, not what kind of genitals they may have. Same thing with women. Being a woman or a man is so much more than physical body. Joy L. Johnson and Robin Repta, in Designing and Conducting Gender, Sex, and Health Research, write, "Gender is manifested in the ways that individuals style their bodies and carry themselves, and also in how they speak and move. In this way, gender is not only produced by and on particular bodies, but is also located within particular activities, behaviors, and practices." So your gender representation and identity has nothing to do with your sex at all. Your sex is simply an aspect of your physical body and not who or what you are. Understanding the differences between biological sex and social gender has helped us as a collective society be more understanding of the transgender community. This is a community of people whose gender do not align with their biological sex. Trans people are helping to change the way that we see gender roles. Trans people have existed all throughout time and in many different cultures, but we are just now receiving recognition and gradual acceptance in America. In recent years, at least. Dr. Amelia Lombardi, in Enhancing Transgender Healthcare, writes, "Social gender refers to how people present themselves in public, the clothing they wear, their hairstyle, their physical characteristics, even how they act and talk. Different cultures have different ways of explaining and dealing with gender variance. Some Native American cultures refer to two-spirit people, which are people with aspects of two genders, and Hindu cultures include Hidras, which are neither man or woman. There has always been many different gender identities and way to express that aspect of life. New names have been given to these identities as they've evolved with time. In the earliest 20th century, trans people were considered transvestites, a term that later evolved to transsexualism and has now evolved to be called transgender. We also know a lot more about what it means to be transgender. It has been misclassified as a type of sexuality or as a mental illness. The term transsexual was only just recently removed from the American Psychiatric Association's Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. The more we understand about the core differences between sex and gender, the more understanding we can be of our trans neighbors and colleagues. There is no mental disorder. There is no confusion. There's just human beings whose biological sex was unable to define their social gender. Everyone has a gender identity, whether it aligns with their biological sex or not. Gender can help us to define our personality traits and how we present ourselves to the world. Biological sex is defined by genitalia, hormones, and body features, while social gender is determined by our demeanor, our presentation, and our personalities. It is impossible to know someone's biological sex just by looking at them, and we can't determine gender identity by our bodies alone. Once we can finally grasp the difference between these two terms, we can finally understand how to support transgender individuals. Our judgment and emotions need to stop being cast upon people we can't understand. I know that in the coming future, trans people will be able to be more comfortable with who we truly are. We just need to learn that gender and sex are not synonyms. Thank you, guys.